All right, moving on. Our next speaker is Major Dave. He's North Carolina Chamber of Conservative Leadership. Major?
Actually, timed about 18, but let's see if I can adjust this a little bit. Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, they always got the Army following the Marines. You are very blessed. Before I start my comments, let me say you're very blessed to have a representative in the legislature like Michael Speciale. I personally witnessed his advocacy on your behalf in the Legislative Research Commission and the efforts to rid us of the cancer known as Common Core. Now, I've traveled to many parts of the globe in my lifetime, and yet, in spite of all those travels, I've never found any place more beautiful and more appealing than the great liberty-loving state of North Carolina. All you have to do is just look around. From the Halifax Resolves to the Mecklenburg Declaration, whose dates are enshrined on our state flag, we have always been in the forefront of the fight for liberty. You know, Boston wasn't the only town to hold a tea party. If you look deeper in our North Carolina history, you'll find out that the ladies of Edenton, right up the water from here, did exactly the same thing. And yes, I recently founded a new group in North Carolina called the North Carolina Chamber of Conservative Leadership. It is a new nonprofit that will provide a level of executive credibility to the diverse grassroots groups across the state of North Carolina. We are modeling it on the Chamber of Commerce only in the sense that we don't tell you what business to be in and we don't tell you how to run it, but it will offer a forum for communication, cooperation, coordination, and collaboration with all groups who share our conservative values. It will help make more clear the differences between conservatives and libertarians who often share the same fiscal goals but yet differ markedly on social values. There are over 170 different conservative grassroots groups just like yours here in North Carolina. And you are a fine example, because even though we are few in number, it is the few that gained us our independence. And if I know anything about those groups that they all agree on, the last thing they want is a higher headquarters telling them what to do. So let me state the Chamber's mission this way. It is to be a resource to help you be more successful in doing what you are already doing, and what it becomes will be driven by your needs. We intend to be an example of a term I hope you will come to more fully appreciate that is often missing in the political realm: servant leadership. We know what it takes to get hats and t-shirts to sell to raise money to fund your efforts, and you know because you've been footing that bill. You know what it takes to put on rallies like this, and even the larger rallies. We get into issues of liability insurance, porta-johns, permit fees, and the costs are extreme. And if you've been part of it, you know because your wallets are lighter for it. Many of you have been more than generous in these last 4 and 5 years in your sacrifice. But frankly, we're all feeling a little tapped out these days. What is needed is a link between resources and the boots on the ground like you that are doing the hard work. It is my vision that the Chamber will offer alternative funding and resources that remove most of those sacrifices and risks that you've been taking on. We will also offer small group leadership training to members and member groups so that they can grow in their professionalism and in their effectiveness. We will offer conservative candidates low-cost campaign resources, especially in things like media production and event support, to more effectively broadcast our message to the general public. And there will be an Angie's List type of conservative-owned businesses that join the Chamber so that we can support those who support us. There will also be a consortium of conservative media outlets, both print and broadcast, who will not only extend our appeal to the broader community, but they will also generate revenue to help fund our activities. Now, to guide this effort, we've selected a board of directors that includes North Carolina Senator Joyce Kravick, who has a long history with Freedom Works, Clarence Henderson from High Point, a noted civil rights activist and one of the original Woolworth's lunch counter sit-in demonstrators from the 60s, and Mrs. Pat Hilliard from Wake County, who has been very active in a broad range of civic, social, and political groups. And then it's rounded out by me and the Reverend Mark Harris from Charlotte, who you know recently ran for the U.S. Senate here. Caucuses will be established among the members for each major issue and concern, like tax reform, illegal immigration, Common Core, Second Amendment, right to life, that require our action. This way, folks of like mind can more easily affiliate and connect with each other across the state, and they will also help the new masses that are only now waking up to the troubles we face in this state by connecting them quickly and directly across with other people already engaged in the fight, especially if no such group exists where they live. The one thing we will not be doing is generating any caucus based on either race or gender. We cannot be credible advocates for equality and begin by building such fences in our own backyard. Everyone has an equal voice and an equal seat at the table. I hope we can all agree that there is just so much more we could accomplish if we had the proper resources. My vision for the chamber is make those resources that you need to make your solutions possible. The 61% that voted in favor of our marriage amendment is our target membership because they represent the clear conservative majority willing to vote conservative principles over party politics. And that brings me to the single most important question that I believe faces us today. What is truly sovereign in our lives? Who has the ultimate power over us? Is it God or is it the Constitution? Well, I come before you today for God and country. Surely we all want smaller government and lower taxes, but my friends, solving our fiscal problems means nothing if all we achieve is to better afford our own moral collapse. Our founding documents clearly proclaim that sovereignty flows from God to we the people, then to our state and local governments, and then and only then to our federal government. We granted them only specifically listed and limited powers in that Constitution. And that is the only recipe for true liberty. It is His authority and His power alone that make our rights unalienable, not the Constitution. And the only thing that makes what government does legitimate is our consent, not their power. They were talking a minute ago, Representative Speciale, about Obamacare. All it should have taken to overturn Obamacare was a reading of the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not covet. You have no right to your neighbor's property, and it is wrong even to desire it. None of us has any right to demand that any other person provide us with their professional services regardless of our ability to pay. There simply is no right to health care. If there was a right to health care under our Constitution, wouldn't we have had doctors and nurses on every covered wagon going west? Personal initiative and excellence in conquering risk is what formed this nation, not government programs, and such programs will never be an acceptable substitute for them. And I say to the ladies here today, it's a simple fact of history that for most of our history as a nation, the primary provider of medical care was not even a trained doctor, it was the mother. No right is ever created just because we can't afford something. But more importantly, there is no third-party exemption to that commandment, simply because we use the power of government to do the taking on our behalf to subsidize our cost. It is not benevolence, and it is not charity. It is socialism, it is ungodly, and it is wrong. So how can this happen in America? Frankly, my friends, it was bound to happen. It was bound to happen once our courts turned their backs on God and ruled that even the most basic right to life comes second to the freedom of choice of a merely inconvenienced mother-to-be. It was bound to happen once that our courts decided that even a lie was constitutionally protected speech. They said it's okay to walk around in a uniform, dripping in medals, claiming to be a war hero when you aren't. And what it says is that our laws are higher than God's. That our Constitution is higher than the Ten Commandments. There can be no justice when a lie is given greater protection than the honor of our veteran dead. And there can certainly be no justice when a helpless unborn child is made the victim of nothing more than their mother's whim, so help me God. It is my testimony today that in all of my military career, I was never once asked to put my country before my God. My oath never demanded that of me then or now. You know, the very fact that you can still be excused from military service because of your religious beliefs proves that in America, God still comes first. A government that insists that God comes second to anything is merely a government playing God. And the man who puts his country before his God has no God but government. You know, if American values offend you, leave. Our founders had their limits, and so do we. How many veterans are standing here with us today? My friend, thank you. Yes, give them a round. If we don't set the example and stand up as the leaders that we were trained to be, if we don't stand up and fight for those beliefs, no one else will, and the next generation will not know that they should or how or why. We've taken prayer out of our schools and replaced it with armed police. These children are being taught that they are safest only when surrounded by armed government agents. This is how a nation comes to put more faith in government, more faith in Kevlar than in God. We've allowed the very self-evident truths on which we were founded to be dismissed by today's bureaucracy of education as merely the demented ramblings of a few disgruntled right-wing, gun-toting, Bible-thumping Tea Party zealots, having no place in our history or our classrooms. My friends, our school system will continue to fail our children and into the next generation as long as they are permitted to focus only what our children carry home in their heads and ignore what they carry home in their hearts. You know, I pray that the recent celebrations of the Passover and Easter bring renewed moral courage to our elected leaders, both in Raleigh and in Washington, to do not just what may be constitutional or legal, but to do what is right. And we have to let them know that when they do, even when it may be unpopular, we have their backs. Religious values do matter to our nation, and not just as a matter of personal and private choice. Even George Washington, our first commander-in-chief, after 8 years in office, in his farewell address, said, quote, "It is foolish to govern without God and the Bible." It is foolish to govern without God and the Bible. Was he a fascist? Was he a theocrat? Because we know that's what we get called when we assert that. Well, of course not. He was simply wise. You know, I hope you all agree, God Bless America didn't become the standard that it is simply because it's a catchy tune. You know, our national cathedral, our national house of worship commissioned by our Congress in Washington has a cross on the top of it. And the likeness of Moses hangs over the main entrance to the People's House in Congress. And the Ten Commandments are carved into the very stone of our Supreme Court building. And in truth, none of this is a violation of our First Amendment, any more so than is a Veterans Memorial with a cross on it. So help me God. None of it amounts to establishing a uniform regime of religion for our nation, nor does it demand of any citizen that they worship, if at all, in any way other than according to the dictates of their own conscience. But they are affirmations of our clear religious heritage as a nation, as one nation under God, who because of his love offers safe haven even to the atheist. Those symbols may not reflect a single thing about you personally, but they speak volumes about the great people you are blessed to live among. Now, our Constitution was never intended to banish religious values from our laws or from the halls of our government. And it was never, ever, ever intended as an authority to turn our military into a morally bankrupt tool of government to suppress its own people. It was designed to give us the best chance of remaining the godly people we were founded to be as our best defense against what we face today: national suicide from moral bankruptcy. Wrong doesn't become right just because we put it in our Constitution or in our laws. You see, when we abolished slavery, it wasn't the constitutional argument. Matter of fact, it had been quite constitutional and upheld by our highest courts for nearly 100 years. It took the higher moral argument to force that change in our Constitution, and the root of that change was born not in the Constitution, but in our God-fearing hearts. Even our Constitution cannot stand when it becomes a license for wrongdoing, and it is never more prone to abuse than when it becomes an end unto itself. So I say to you today, with equal amounts of reverence and sadness, that it is America's destiny to be brought to her knees. That's right. America is destined to be brought to her knees, either in defeat or in prayerful obedience to our Creator. And my friends, there is only one of these two from which we can rise. Great things happen in America when presidents and priests, reverends and rabbis, generals and governors all pray to the same God in admitted dependence on Him and choose to follow His path. So let me close with these final thoughts. We fail and dishonor all who have fought and died for our liberty if we allow our Constitution to become the tool of its own destruction. As Lincoln said, it's not important that God is on our side, but that we be on His. So let me say this so everyone can hear. To not believe in God is to not believe in the America founded in 1776. To not believe in God is to believe that the words of our Declaration of Independence are at best a fantasy and at worst an outright lie. To not believe in God makes it easy to believe that our founders, who once cited those laws of nature and of nature's God as the sole authority for our rights and our liberty, simply tossed them aside when they ratified the Constitution. And nothing is more absurd No, we stand here today as proof of what President Kennedy once said. Because as the window to our brightest future, because we don't ask what our country can do for us. We ask what we can do for our country. And this is our America. Don't tread on me. We won't be getting into any railroad cars, and we won't be letting anybody put us or our families into any kind of camps for our protection. No, when it comes to that, we will fight back, and we will face whatever comes our way until we either win or die trying. That's the American way. If anyone wants to know just who is going to stand up and fight back against the assault on our God-given liberties, let them just look around and let them see us. Let them recognize our faces and let them know our names, because we are not afraid to stand up. Amen. You know, our cause is just. Our purpose is righteous. And our mission is clear because our God is still sovereign over all. As my good friend Wild Bill for America likes to say, it is time for America to bless God again. May we all live our lives in a way to be continually worthy of His blessings. God bless you. God bless the great liberty-loving state of North Carolina. And God bless these United States, one nation under God, in whom we still trust. Thank you.
Wow, I'm sure glad we had Major Dave show up today, because he pointed out a number of things that I was remiss in, and I appreciate that. Actually, I left my prepared notes, prayers, and statements at home, and so I was ad-libbing this morning, but some of the things I've forgotten. He pointed out the cost of doing things like this and the selling of the T-shirts. Yes, we're selling T-shirts. And in this weather, this is your last opportunity to get some of our hoodies and long sleeve shirts. and today we'll give you a 10% discount on those. Want to thank Tom's Tunes for being here today. Tom's Tunes always shows up for these events. They don't charge us anything, and we appreciate that. So please take out your pen and paper and jot down that phone number on the side of the trailer. And anytime you need their type of services, please call them, because they're very good at it and they're very loyal to us. We appreciate their. Another thing you pointed out was our veterans and their service to our country. Again, let's give our vets a big round of applause, because we owe it all to them. Another thing he pointed out that many of you may not be aware of, or many people may not be aware of, I'm sure most of y'all are, but how many know that at the highest levels of our military leadership, most of them have been forced out? The people that have the values that Major Dave stood here and espoused in his speech, the leaders that we depended on to serve our country and to protect us and to watch over us, have been forced out of service because they don't agree with our current administration's philosophies and principles. You know, that's the kind of information we've got to get out there, because I think a lot of the apathy is due to the fact that they're ox sitting in the ditch yet. They haven't felt the pressure. They are not suffering any consequences of it yet, so they think everything's all right. They're not aware of what is taking place behind the scenes. And that's where an organization like CCTA comes in. We have educational classes. We study the Constitution. We teach it. We don't charge for those classes. They're free and open to the public. We provide free copies of the Constitution at every gun show that we do, and we do 3 now, New Bern, Greenville, and Jacksonville. At those gun shows, we hand out the Constitution, say, hey, here's a free copy of your gun permit. We provide other materials like the petitions that we ask you to sign today. We have speakers come in from all across the country, once a month at our monthly meetings, which are the third Tuesday of every month. Right down the street here, a couple of blocks, Stanley Hall Ballroom, third Tuesday of every month, 7 p.m. This month, our featured speaker is Jay Singleton, Dr. Jay Singleton. The subject matter of that speech that he will give is the Certificate of Need. And for those of you that don't know what a Certificate of Need is, it's a requirement by state law that you have a certificate to be able to open up a surgery center. And the problem is a lot of states have already dropped that requirement, but North Carolina still has that. And the Certificate of Need is usually bought up by the hospitals and the people with the money, and to try to prevent competition. To put it in a nutshell, if he was allowed to have a Certificate of Need to open up a surgery center in his specialty, which is removing cataracts, and he's done over 20,000 of those operations, you could go to his surgery center, be serviced by professionals that only specialize in the cataract surgery, and do it for less than half the cost of what you're having to pay for going to the hospital. So he'll be speaking to us this month. We've got Americans for Prosperity here with us today. Great grassroots group. They've got some tables set up here out of the rain that we didn't get, but we were anticipating. Some gifts up here and information for you. Please come up and see them. And we just appreciate so much all the people that are involved in the grassroots effort trying to get the word out. So we thank you for your participation. Now, maybe I haven't forgotten anything else.